Hello everyone, and welcome to the Sleepy Almanac. This is where knowledge turns into sleep, and my voice carries you through the night. Maybe today was a long one. Whatever it held, it's behind you now, and you can set it down. From here, all you have to do is listen, let go, and drift off. Everything here is made for one thing, to help you relax and fall asleep. Tonight, we've gathered 300 facts about the world. A little of everything: the deep ocean, the far corners of history, the edges of space. You don't need to remember any of it. Just get comfortable, close your eyes, and we'll begin. Deep under Antarctica, buried beneath kilometers of ice, there are lakes. The largest of them is called Lake Vostok. Nothing has touched its water for millions of years, sealed away from the surface and from the light. And there may still be something living down there. The smallest bird in the world is the bee hummingbird. It lives in Cuba, it weighs less than 2 grams, and it sits comfortably in the palm of your hand. For all that, its heart runs at 1,200 beats a minute. A shark never stops growing teeth. One falls out, another moves forward to take its place, and the row behind it shifts up. Over a lifetime, a single shark works its way through tens of thousands of them. Saturn is quietly losing its rings. Ice and dust are drifting down onto the planet, a little more every year. Give it a few million years, and they may be gone altogether. Oysters can change sex. Depending on the water, the season, and the food, the same animal can be male one year and female the next. It is simply the most useful way to keep breeding. The fastest bird alive is the peregrine falcon. In a hunting dive, it passes 300 kilometers an hour. Nothing else in the animal world moves that fast. In some deserts, the stones move by themselves. On the floor of Death Valley, there are rocks that leave long trails behind them across the dry mud. Thin sheets of ice form overnight, the wind pushes, and the stones slide. The Amazon is so wide that where it meets the sea, the river and the ocean blur into one sheet of water. In the rainy season, it can be 50 kilometers across, an ocean inside a continent. Far down in the dark ocean live the anglerfish. The female carries a small glowing lure above her head to draw prey towards her mouth. The male is so small that he fastens onto her body and stays there, slowly fusing with her, until almost nothing of him is left. With seahorses, it is the male who carries the young. He has a pouch on his belly where the eggs develop until they are ready. It is one of the few places in the animal world where the father does more of the work than the mother. The Earth does not spin perfectly evenly. Its axis wobbles, and over long stretches of time, that wobble changes the climate. These are the Milankovitch cycles, and they are tied to the coming and going of the ice ages. A dolphin can sleep with half its brain. One half rests while the other stays awake to watch for danger and to keep it breathing. That is why a dolphin never drowns in its sleep. The human body glows. It gives off a faint light, far too weak for the eye to catch, produced by the ordinary chemistry going on inside your cells. You are luminous, just not visibly so. The Earth is slowing down. Millions of years ago, a day lasted about 22 hours. Millions of years from now, it will be longer than the 24 we have. The water molecules on this planet are older than the planet. They formed in the cloud of gas and dust that came before the sun. When you drink a glass of water, you are handling something more than 4 billion years old. Ants can build bridges out of themselves. When a gap or a stream blocks the trail, they lock their bodies together until the others can walk across. For those minutes, the colony stops being thousands of animals and becomes one. The deepest cave on Earth is Veryovkina in Abkhazia. It runs more than 2,200 meters down. It is a whole underground world, and only the most experienced cavers ever see the bottom of it. Not every rainbow is colored. Occasionally, a pale white arc appears at night, made not by sunlight, but by moonlight bending through the same drops of water. They are called moonbows. Venus sits at more than 460 degrees. It is not because it is close to the sun, because Mercury is closer. It is carbon dioxide holding in the heat over and over until the whole planet cooks. Some plants talk to each other in chemicals. When insects start eating one of them, it releases a scent into the air. The plants nearby pick it up and begin making their own defensive poisons before anything has touched them. Somewhere in the Pacific, there is a place called Point Nemo. It is the spot on Earth furthest from any land, more than 2,600 kilometers from the nearest shore. It is so remote that falling spacecraft reach it more often than people do. Whales sing at frequencies that carry for thousands of kilometers. Their songs are not simply noise. They repeat, they change season by season, and they are built in phrases, which is why people keep comparing them to music. Mammoths have been found in Siberia with their fur intact and the last meal still in their stomachs. The ice held them almost untouched for tens of thousands of years. From those bodies, we can read the DNA of an animal that has been gone since the Ice Age. A bat's wing is a hand. The skin is stretched between fingers that grew long and thin, and if you lay the bones out beside your own, you can see the same design underneath. Lava can turn into glass. When molten rock cools fast enough, it never gets the chance to form crystals, and what you get instead is obsidian. People were cutting with it long before they learned to work metal. There is an island of rubbish in the Pacific larger than France. It is not solid ground you could stand on. It is billions of small pieces of plastic that the currents have gathered and are still gathering. Chess began in India in the 6th century. It was called chaturanga, and its 4 kinds of piece stood for the 4 parts of an army: the infantry, the cavalry, the chariots, and the elephants. From there it traveled west and never stopped moving. At the bottom of the ocean, there are black smokers. They are underwater vents that throw out scalding water full of metals, and around them live animals that have never needed the sun. They feed on chemistry instead of light, and the whole scene looks borrowed from another planet. An octopus has 3 hearts. 2 of them push blood through the gills, and the 3rd sends it around the body. When the octopus swims, that 3rd heart stops beating, which is part of why it would usually rather walk. You cannot see the Great Wall of China from space with the naked eye. It is too narrow, and it is the same color as the land it runs through. The story is a useful reminder of how quickly something repeated often enough turns into a fact. There is a blind spot in your eye. It is the place where the nerve leaves the back of the eyeball, and there are no light-sensitive cells there at all. Your brain fills in the missing patch without telling you. None of us see the world directly. We see the version our brain has finished. Some trees live for thousands of years. A bristlecone pine can pass 4,800, which means the same tree stood through the rise and fall of civilizations and is still putting out needles. Photosynthesis holds up everything else. Chlorophyll in a leaf catches sunlight and starts a chain of reactions that turns water and carbon dioxide into sugar and oxygen. Every meal you have ever eaten and every breath you have ever taken came out of that. We know what the inside of the Earth looks like because of earthquakes. The waves they send out travel differently through solid rock and liquid rock, and by reading how they arrive on the far side of the world, we worked out that the planet has a solid inner core and a liquid outer one. That liquid outer core is what gives us a magnetic field. The atmosphere is built in layers. The troposphere, where the weather happens. Then the stratosphere, the mesosphere, the thermosphere, and finally the exosphere, thinning out into space. The ozone in the stratosphere absorbs ultraviolet light, and without that one layer, nothing could live on the surface. Lightning heats the air around it to 30,000 degrees. That is roughly 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. The air expands so violently that it slams outward, and what you hear as thunder is that impact rolling across the sky. A blue whale's heart is about the size of a small car. It weighs around 180 kilograms, and it beats hard enough to be picked up from 2 kilometers away. There is no larger organ in the animal world. Antarctica is the driest continent on Earth. In its dry valleys, there has been no rainfall for thousands of years, no snow that stays, nothing. They are so empty that engineers use them to test equipment meant for Mars. There are about 86 billion neurons in a human brain. Each one can form thousands of connections with the others. The total number of those connections is greater than the number of stars in our galaxy. If you unwound the DNA in a single cell, it would run about 2 meters. It fits inside a nucleus you need a microscope to see, because it is wound and wound again around proteins called histones. Everything you inherited is folded into that space. A coral reef is not rock. It is a colony of living animals, small polyps building on the skeletons of the ones before them, until the structure is large enough to hold thousands of other species. People call reefs the rainforests of the ocean, and the comparison is not an exaggeration. Jellyfish have been here for more than 500 million years. They were here before the dinosaurs, and they were here after them. Many of them glow, and that light helps them hunt and helps them escape being hunted. There are mountains on the ocean floor, taller than Everest. They are hidden under kilometers of water, and most of them have never been visited. In that sense, the seafloor of our own planet is less explored than the surface of the moon. Jupiter has the strongest magnetic field of any planet. It is around 20,000 times stronger than the Earth's. Its storms run on the same scale. The Great Red Spot has been turning for centuries. A black hole is usually wrapped in a disk of falling matter. Everything in that disk is accelerated to nearly the speed of light, and the friction makes it blaze. Some of these disks outshine the entire galaxy around them. Volcanoes make new land. Magma rises, meets water, cools and hardens, and an island appears where there was open sea. That is how the Hawaiian Islands came to exist, one after another. Everest is still growing. The Indian Plate keeps pushing north into Asia, and the Himalayas keep rising by a few millimeters a year. The highest place on Earth is slightly higher every century. There are more bacteria in your body than there are cells of your own. Most of them live in your gut, and together they make up your microbiome. Without them, you could not digest what you eat, and your immune system would not know what to fight. Bone is not dead material. It is being taken apart and rebuilt constantly by two kinds of cell working against each other. Given about 10 years, you will have replaced your entire skeleton. Blood is never blue, though the veins in your arm look it. That color is a trick of skin and light. Blood is always red, and the only thing that changes is the shade, depending on how much oxygen the hemoglobin is carrying. Bees have a language of movement. A scout that has found a good field comes back to the hive and dances, and the angle and the length of that dance tell the others which direction to fly and how far. It is one of the most precise pieces of communication in the animal world. Your skin holds millions of receptors. Some report pressure, some temperature, some pain, and each has its own kind of nerve ending. That is why a touch registers before you have had time to think about it. There are thousands of satellites in orbit right now. They carry your calls, your maps, your weather forecasts, and most of the internet. They are also joined up there by a growing amount of debris, and the debris is the part we cannot easily clean up. A tiger's stripes are not only in the fur. Shave a tiger, and the pattern is still there, printed on the skin underneath. Every tiger's pattern is different, as individual as a fingerprint. Some desert stones sing. When the wind crosses the dunes at a particular speed, the sand and rock give off a low humming that carries for a long way. Travelers have been writing about the sound for centuries. In 2010, an Icelandic volcano called Eyjafjallajökull shut down air travel across Europe. The problem was not lava, but ash. Fine volcanic dust melts inside jet engines and stops them. For a week, the sky over a continent belonged to the volcano. Elephants recognize themselves in a mirror. Very few animals pass that test, and passing it means the animal understands that the reflection is not another elephant. It is one of the clearest signs we have of an inner life. The pressure at the bottom of the ocean would kill a person instantly. Deep-sea fish live there without difficulty. Their bodies contain almost no air, and their tissues are built to hold the weight rather than resist it. Salt was once worth roughly what gold was. It kept food from spoiling, which meant it kept people alive through winter. And in places it was paid out as wages. The word salary comes from the Latin for exactly that. There are spots on the sun that are cooler than the surface around them. They look dark only by comparison. Many of them are larger than the Earth, and they mark places where the star's magnetic field has broken through. Bees see ultraviolet light. Flowers that look plain to us have patterns painted across them in colors we have no name for, and those patterns point straight at the nectar. The flower is advertising, and we are simply not the audience. Stalactites hang from the roof of a cave. Stalagmites grow up from the floor towards them. Both are built one drop at a time over hundreds of years, and the layers inside them record the climate the way rings record a tree. Iceland heats its houses with the ground. Water is drawn from hot springs and pumped through the towns, and geothermal energy covers almost everything the country needs. It is about as clean as power gets. A chameleon's tongue can be longer than its body. It fires out in a fraction of a second, faster than an insect can react, and hits with enough force to knock the prey off the branch it was sitting on. Water is almost the only substance that expands when it freezes. That is why ice floats. If it sank instead, lakes and oceans would freeze from the bottom upwards, and nothing living could have survived a winter. High in Tibet, the air is so thin that water boils at 85 degrees. Boiling no longer means what it means at sea level, so food will not cook properly. People there build their recipes around it and use pressure cookers to put the heat back. The potato comes from the Andes. It was being farmed high in those mountains thousands of years before anyone in Europe had seen one. Few plants have changed history as much. Today, it feeds billions. In a cave in Mexico, there are crystals of gypsum more than 10 meters long. They grew slowly in mineral-rich water over roughly 500,000 years. They are the largest crystals ever found on this planet. Roman concrete has outlasted ours. It was mixed with volcanic ash, which reacts with seawater and, instead of crumbling, grows new crystals inside the cracks. Roman harbors have been standing in the sea for 2,000 years. Scorpions glow under ultraviolet light. Something in the outer layer of their shell absorbs it and gives it back as a soft blue. Researchers searching the desert at night simply carry an ultraviolet lamp and watch them light up. An owl can turn its head 270 degrees. Its neck bones and the arteries running through them are built to allow it without cutting off the blood supply. An owl's eyes cannot move in their sockets, so the head has to do the work. Paper was made from rags long before it was made from wood. The change to wood pulp is what made books cheap, and cheap books are what made reading ordinary rather than rare. A whale can hold its breath for an hour and a half and dive more than 3 kilometers down. No other mammal comes close. On the way down, its heart slows, and the blood withdraws to the organs that need it most. In parts of the Atacama Desert in Chile, no rain has fallen in hundreds of years. It is the driest place on Earth that is not frozen. Mars rovers are tested there because it is the closest thing we have. There are hot spots on the sea floor where warm water rises through cracks in the rock. Whole ecosystems form around them, tucked into the dark, and the animals living there exist nowhere else. Eucalyptus leaves are poisonous to almost every animal in Australia. Koalas evolved a way to eat them anyway. The trade is that the leaves give back so little energy that a koala spends most of its life asleep, digesting. The first spectacles appeared in Italy in the 13th century. They were made for monks who needed to keep reading in poor light as their eyesight went. Optics has been quietly extending working lives ever since. Mauna Kea in Hawaii is taller than Everest if you measure from the base. Most of it is underwater. From the sea floor to the summit, it stands more than 10 kilometers, which makes it the tallest mountain on Earth by that measure, and not by the usual one. Dolphins call each other by name. Each one develops a signature whistle early in life. The others learn it, and they use it to address that particular dolphin. It is the closest thing to our own system of names found in the sea. Dinosaur bones are often found with the impressions of feathers around them. They were not the bare reptiles of the old illustrations. Many of them were covered, patterned, and closer to birds than to anything alive on land today. The largest cave in the world by volume is Son Doong in Vietnam. A skyscraper would fit inside it. It has its own weather, its own river, and a patch of jungle growing where the roof collapsed and let the light in. The nautilus has barely changed in hundreds of millions of years. It is one of the animals we call living fossils. Its spiral shell is divided into sealed chambers, and by adjusting the gas inside them, it rises and sinks like a submarine. Fire was not only made by friction. People carried a bracket fungus that smolders slowly for hours once it catches, and that let them take a fire with them rather than start a new one each night. A starfish has no brain. It has a ring of nerves instead, circling the middle of its body, and that is enough to coordinate hundreds of tiny feet. For an animal with no center of thought, it manages a surprising amount. The tallest waterfall in the world is Angel Falls in Venezuela. The drop is almost a kilometer. The water falls for so long that much of it never arrives as water at all. It breaks apart on the way down and reaches the bottom as mist. Horses can sleep standing up. A set of ligaments in the legs locks the joints so the animal can rest without falling. For proper deep sleep, they still have to lie down, and they take it in turns while the others keep watch. Space is not silent. It is empty of air, so nothing carries sound the way it does here, but it is full of electromagnetic waves, and those can be converted into something you can listen to. What comes out is a set of whistles, hisses, and slow rising tones. Some bears do not sleep deeply when they hibernate. Their body temperature barely drops, and they can be up and moving within seconds if something is wrong. It costs them more energy, and it keeps them alive. For fireflies, light is not one signal, but a language. Every species flashes in its own rhythm, its own spacing, its own length. On a summer night, a field of them is several conversations happening at once, and none of them are talking to each other. In northeast India, there are bridges made of living roots. People guide the roots of fig trees across a river year after year until they take hold on the far bank and thicken. The bridge grows stronger with age rather than weaker, and some of them have been in use for centuries. Whale milk has the consistency of paste. It is extraordinarily rich in fat, and the calf takes it in mouthfuls rather than sips. It has to be that thick, because anything thinner would simply disperse into the sea before the calf could swallow it. Jupiter has auroras. They are far brighter than ours, and they never switch off because they are not driven by occasional solar storms, but by the planet's own enormous magnetic field. Early compasses did not always point north. In ancient China, the instrument was a magnetized spoon that settled pointing south, and south was treated as the primary direction. North became the standard much later, and largely by convention. Crocodiles do have tear glands. When they spend time out of the water, their eyes produce fluid to keep from drying out, which means a crocodile on land really does appear to weep. That is where the expression comes from. There are rock carvings in the Sahara showing giraffes and elephants. They are older than the pyramids. They were made when the same ground was green savanna, with rivers and grazing herds. The desert is younger than the art on its stones. Stalactites in caves in China have been dated at more than 500,000 years. The chemistry laid down in each layer records the climate at the time. Read from the top down, a single stalactite is a written history of the weather. Cats have whiskers on their legs as well as on their faces. They pick up small movements of air and the exact position of whatever the paw is about to touch. That is a large part of why a cat can land where it means to in the dark. The fastest snake in the world is the black mamba. It moves at around 20 kilometers an hour, which is quick enough that outrunning one is not the plan. Its venom is among the most dangerous of any snake. A cucumber is about 95% water, and it also contains compounds that help the body shed heat. People were using them against summer heat long before anyone could explain why they worked. Some deep-sea fish have skeletons made largely of cartilage rather than bone. The result is a body that bends instead of resisting, which is exactly what you need at that pressure. A rigid animal down there would be crushed. The oldest surviving globe was made in Nuremberg in the 15th century, just before news of the Americas reached Europe. It is a complete picture of the world with an entire hemisphere missing, and its maker had no idea. A snail can have 25,000 teeth. They sit in rows on a ribbon called the radula, which the animal drags across its food like a file. It is less a mouth than a small mill. The oldest written song we have is more than 3,000 years old. It was found in Mesopotamia, cut into a clay tablet, complete with notation. There was enough information on it to work out the melody and play it again. A camel's eyelashes are long enough to keep sand out of its eyes, and its nostrils close. Everything about the animal is built around one problem, and the solutions are all small. In some places, the sea glows at night. Billions of microscopic organisms light up when the water around them is disturbed. So every wave draws a line of light along the beach, and every step leaves a print of it. The largest bird that ever flew was Argentavis. It lived about 6 million years ago, and its wings spanned around 7 meters. It is likely enough that people found its bones, and that those bones became the giant birds of legend. Your brain runs on about 20 watts. That is a dim light bulb. For that, it handles vision, language, memory, balance, and everything else, and no machine we have built comes close on that budget. The oldest wheel archaeologists have found is around 5,000 years old. It was dug out of a marsh in Slovenia, wooden, with the axle still with it. Very few objects changed the world as completely. The water in Lake Baikal is so clear that the bottom is visible 40 meters down. It is the deepest lake on Earth, and it holds around a fifth of all the unfrozen freshwater on the planet. Some dunes sing. When enough grains slide down a slope together at the right speed, they set up a low tone that can be heard for a kilometer or more. Travelers wrote it into their legends long before anyone measured it. The longest river in the world is the Nile. It runs more than 6,600 kilometers and crosses several climate zones on the way. An entire civilization was built along one bank of it. A dragonfly has 4 wings and can drive each one separately. That is what lets it hover, fly backwards, and turn on the spot at 50 kilometers an hour. No other insect flies that way. The Sphinx at Giza is at least 4,500 years old. It faces exactly east, towards the sunrise, and it was almost certainly built to guard what stands behind it. The coldest inhabited place on Earth is Oymyakon in Yakutia. Winter temperatures drop below -60. People live there year-round, and the whole shape of daily life is arranged around not being outside for long. A dragonfly's eyes are made of thousands of separate lenses. Together, they give it a field of view of nearly 360 degrees. Almost nothing can approach a dragonfly from a direction it cannot see. Some crabs change the color of their shell to match whatever they are sitting on. It happens slowly, over days, and it works well enough that the animal effectively disappears into the rock. Deep inside Jupiter, there is an ocean of liquid hydrogen. The pressure below the clouds is so extreme that the gas stops behaving like gas. Further down still, it begins to conduct electricity like a metal. Hippo milk is pink. The animal secretes an acid onto its skin that protects it from bacteria and from the sun, and it tints everything, including the milk. It is a sunscreen and an antibiotic at once. There are dead zones on the ocean floor. In them, the oxygen has been used up, and nothing that needs it can live there. Most of them are made by fertilizer washing off farmland and feeding blooms of algae. Icebergs are not always white. They can be blue, green, striped, and occasionally almost black. The color depends on how much air is trapped in the ice and what minerals the glacier picked up on the way down. The hourglass was used for more than telling the time. It measured out doses of medicine, timed sermons, and controlled cooking in an age when nothing else was portable and reliable. The loudest animal in the sea is not the whale. It is the pistol shrimp. It snaps one oversized claw shut so fast that the water tears open into a bubble. And when the bubble collapses, it makes a bang of nearly 200 decibels, louder than a jet taking off. Some stones grow. In Romania, there are formations called trovants that get visibly larger after heavy rain, as water carries minerals into the porous rock and swells it from the inside. On old maps, Terra incognita marked the parts nobody had reached. Mapmakers filled the space with dragons and sea monsters, and the pictures are an honest record of what people felt about the edge of the known world. Trees talk to each other underground. Threads of fungus link their roots into a network, and through it they pass warning signals and move nutrients from a tree that has plenty to one that is struggling. People have taken to calling it the Wood Wide Web. Flares on the sun reach us. They set off magnetic storms, interfere with radio and satellites, and can push power grids to failure. All of it comes from a star 150 million kilometers away. Stars do not actually twinkle. Their light passes through moving layers of our atmosphere, and it is our own air that makes them shiver. Seen from orbit, every star burns perfectly steady. The oldest civilization we know of is Sumer. They gave us writing, the wheel, and the first cities that governed themselves. Almost everything that came afterwards was built on what they worked out first. Humans have been here for hundreds of thousands of years. Writing covers only the last 5,000. Everything before that we reach through archaeology and inference, which means most of our own story is a reconstruction. Sharks very rarely develop cancer. Something in their immune system and in the structure of their cells makes them unusually resistant to it, and working out exactly what has become a serious line of medical research. An elephant's memory is real and specific. They recognize individuals after decades apart, and they remember where water was in a drought years ago. In a hard year, the oldest female in the herd is the map. Galapagos tortoises can live past 150. They move slowly, and their metabolism runs slowly, and the two facts are not unrelated. In the animal world, they are the standing symbol of long life. The smallest bone in your body is in your ear. It is called the stapes, and it is about 2.5 millimeters long. Every sound you have ever heard passed through it on the way in. There are cave fish that have lost their eyes completely. Generation by generation, in permanent darkness, the eyes stopped being worth the cost of building. They navigate by pressure and by receptors along the skin, and they manage perfectly well. A giraffe has 7 neck vertebrae. So do you. They are simply enormously elongated, which is what lets the animal reach the top branches of a tree without changing the basic design at all. The Great Pyramid at Giza was the tallest stone structure in the world for more than 4,000 years. Its blocks weigh several tons each. Exactly how they were moved and placed is still argued over. The Lighthouse of Alexandria was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Its fire was visible for tens of kilometers out to sea, and it guided ships for more than 1,000 years before earthquakes finally brought it down. The library at Alexandria held hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Losing it is usually counted as the single greatest loss of knowledge in history. And the worst part is that we do not know what was in it. We cannot even list what we lost. Mars has a mountain called Olympus Mons, more than 21 kilometers high. That is roughly 3 times Everest. It is the largest volcano in the solar system, and it is so wide that standing on it, you would not be able to tell you are on a slope. Saturn would float. Its average density is lower than that of water. So, given an ocean large enough, the planet would sit on the surface of it. It is one of the strangest facts about the gas giants, and it is entirely true. Titan, one of Saturn's moons, has rivers and lakes. They are not filled with water, but with liquid methane and ethane. There is rain, there are shorelines, there are river deltas, and none of it is water. The northern lights happen when charged particles from the sun hit our atmosphere. They excite atoms of oxygen and nitrogen, and those atoms give the energy back as light. The color depends on which gas and how high up. The watch on your wrist works on quartz. Voltage makes the crystal vibrate at a fixed frequency, and counting those vibrations is what keeps the time. It is so stable that it changed what accuracy meant in the 20th century. The Internet began as a military project. In 1969, the first message was sent between 2 universities in California. It was supposed to say the word login. The system crashed after 2 letters, so the first thing ever sent across the Internet was low. The steam engine rearranged the world. It made factories possible, then railways, then ships that did not depend on wind. Everything we mean by the Industrial Revolution follows from it. X-rays were found by accident. Wilhelm Röntgen noticed a screen glowing on the other side of the room while he was working with a cathode tube, and realized something invisible was passing through solid matter. Within a year, doctors were using it to look at broken bones. Your tongue is the only muscle in your body attached at one end only. It handles speech, swallowing, and taste, and it moves in ways nothing else in the body can. A nerve signal can travel at 120 meters a second. That is why your hand is off the hot pan before you have consciously decided anything. Nerve cells pass the message electrically along their length and chemically across the gaps. The back of your eye holds rods and cones. Rods are sensitive to dim light and give you night vision without color. Cones need more light and give you color. Everything you see is the two of them working together. Sound travels roughly 4 times faster in water than in air. That is why whales can hear each other across whole ocean basins, and why their songs carry for hundreds of kilometers without fading away. In the Namib Desert, there are beetles that drink fog. They climb to the crest of a dune before dawn, stand facing the wind, and let moisture condense on their backs and run down into their mouths. It is one of the driest places on Earth, and they get their water out of the air. Spider silk is stronger than steel of the same weight. It is lighter than a feather, and it stretches without snapping, and we have been trying to reproduce it in a laboratory for decades without fully succeeding. Your skin replaces itself about every 4 weeks. Old cells die and flake away, while new ones rise from below. The barrier between you and everything else is rebuilt from underneath, continuously, for your whole life. There is a jellyfish that does not have to die of old age. When it is damaged or starving, it can revert to an earlier stage of its own development and start again. Biologists call it biologically immortal, which is not quite the same as immortal, but it is close. An electric eel can put out 600 volts. It uses the shock to stun prey and to defend itself, and the whole rear 2/3 of its body is essentially a battery made of modified muscle. Greenland was named the Green Land while almost entirely covered in ice. The name was marketing, invented in the Viking Age to attract settlers. The climate was never mild. The Great Red Spot on Jupiter is a storm bigger than the Earth. It has been under observation for more than 300 years, which means it was already old when the first person pointed a telescope at it. Squid and cuttlefish change color in a fraction of a second. Their skin is full of pigment sacs that mussels can pull open and let snap shut. They use it to hide, to warn, and in some species to send signals down one side of the body while the other side says something else. The baobab in Africa can have a trunk 30 meters around. It stores an enormous amount of water inside itself, which is why it is often called the bottle tree, and why it survives where almost nothing else does. The highest air temperature ever recorded on Earth was in Death Valley, nearly 57 degrees. It is one of the least forgiving places on the planet, and people live at the edge of it all year. The Roman calendar had 10 months to begin with. January and February were added later, and nobody renamed anything afterwards. That is why September, which means the 7th month, sits 9th in our year. In blind people, hearing and touch sharpen considerably. The brain does not leave the visual cortex idle. It hands it over to the other senses. The name for that reorganization is neuroplasticity. Some sharks glow in the dark. Their skin gives off a soft green light, and in the dim blue of the deep ocean, that glow makes them harder to see rather than easier, because it matches what little light there is. The ancient Olympic Games were held in honor of Zeus. Athletes ran, wrestled, and threw, and there was no prize for second place. Winners were written into songs and set up in stone. A black hole is so dense that a teaspoon of the material would weigh millions of tons. It is the most extreme state matter is known to reach anywhere in the universe. Echidnas are mammals that lay eggs. They live in Australia. They are covered in spines. They feed their young on milk, and they hatch from a shell. They sit across a line we normally think is firm. You are about 60% water. It carries nutrients, removes waste, cushions the brain, and carries the electrical signals along your nerves. Lose 10% of it, and you are in serious danger. The deepest gorge in the world is the Kali Gandaki in Nepal. Measured from the peaks on either side, the drop is more than 5 kilometers. You can stand at the bottom with Himalayan summits directly above you. A zebra's stripes are not only camouflage. They help the animal shed heat, and they confuse biting flies, which cannot land properly on a striped surface. Every zebra's pattern is unique. Kamchatka has hundreds of volcanoes and geysers. It is one of the most geologically active places on Earth, and parts of it look less like a landscape than like a rehearsal for another planet. The moon is drifting away from us at about 3.5 centimeters a year. Millions of years from now, it will be too far away to cover the sun completely, and total eclipses will stop happening. The first writing was cuneiform, pressed into wet clay with a cut reed. That is where recorded history begins, in the literal sense. Everything before it we have to infer. A snake's jaws are joined by elastic ligaments rather than a fixed hinge. That is what lets it swallow prey wider than its own head, moving the two halves of the lower jaw forward one at a time. The largest living thing on Earth is a fungus. In Oregon, there is a single organism spread through the soil across more than 9 square kilometers. Most of it is invisible, and it has been growing for thousands of years. Glaciers hold ancient air. Bubbles trapped in the ice are samples of the atmosphere from hundreds of thousands of years ago, sealed and dated by depth. Drill down, and you can measure what the sky used to be made of. There is an island in Japan populated by rabbits. There are no predators, so they are entirely unafraid, and they come straight up to visitors. It has become one of the odder places on the tourist map. Stars are often born in pairs. Double systems are more common than single ones, and some pairs orbit so close that they pull material off each other across the gap. There are about 650 muscles in the human body. The strongest for its size is the one that closes your jaw. It can generate pressure measured in hundreds of kilograms. It rains acid on Venus. The atmosphere is carbon dioxide with clouds of sulfuric acid, and the drops fall and then evaporate again before they ever reach the ground. The rain never arrives. The oldest known map of the world comes from Mesopotamia. It shows the Euphrates and the land around it, with the rest of the world drawn as a ring of ocean. It is more than 2,500 years old. In the Arctic, there is a polar day and a polar night. For months in summer, the sun never sets, and for months in winter, it never rises. People who live there learn to sleep by the clock rather than by the light. Lightning does strike the same place repeatedly. The Empire State Building takes dozens of hits a year. Anything tall and well-earthed is effectively an invitation. Below a certain depth in the ocean, no light arrives at all. The animals living there make their own. In permanent darkness, being able to produce light is not decoration. It is how you hunt, hide, and find a mate. Roman roads are still in the ground across Europe. They were built in layers, with drainage cut in from the start, and that is why they lasted. An empire is only as connected as its roads let it be. Enamel is the only part of your body that cannot repair itself. It has no living cells in it, so any damage done to a tooth stays done. That single fact is the reason dentistry exists. Our galaxy is on a collision course with Andromeda. In a few billion years, the two will merge into one much larger galaxy. On that scale, this is ordinary. Galaxies do this routinely. Below 100 meters, divers can get nitrogen narcosis. Under pressure, nitrogen starts affecting the nervous system and produces something very close to drunkenness. It is dangerous precisely because it feels pleasant. Penguins find their partner by voice in a colony of thousands. Both birds learn the other's call, and they can pick it out of the noise from a considerable distance. Among all that identical black and white, sound is the only reliable name. Elephants speak below our hearing. Their low calls travel tens of kilometers through the ground and the air, which is how separate herds stay in contact across a landscape without ever being in sight of each other. Sailors drew monsters on their charts, and it was not only decoration. A drawing of something enormous marked water that had taken ships. That is where the kraken and the sirens came from. One of the oldest instruments we have found is a flute. The earliest is more than 35,000 years old, cut from bone, with the finger holes still clean. Music is older than every civilization that has ever existed. When Krakatoa erupted in 1883, the sound traveled around the world several times. People heard the bang more than 4,000 kilometers away. It is the loudest event in recorded history. Sugar does not really give you energy in a burst. What happens is a quick rise in blood glucose and then a drop, and it is the drop most people notice. The tiredness afterwards feels like a consequence of the sugar, and in a way it is. The cheetah is the fastest animal on land. It reaches 100 kilometers an hour within a few seconds. It also cannot keep it up for more than about half a minute because the animal overheats faster than it tires. The axolotl regrows almost anything, not only limbs, but parts of the heart, the spine, even sections of the brain, without scarring. A great deal of medical research is essentially an attempt to find out how. Vikings navigated with sunstones. A particular crystal splits light in a way that reveals where the sun is even under thick cloud, and that was enough to hold a course. It worked centuries before the compass reached the north. Lobster blood is blue. It carries oxygen using copper rather than iron, and copper turns blue when it binds oxygen instead of red. In cold water, it works better than ours would. The Mona Lisa is built from layers of paint only a few microns thick, laid one over another. There are no lines anywhere in the face. That is where the softness comes from, and why the expression seems to change while you are looking at it. Caffeine does not add energy. It blocks a chemical called adenosine, which is what builds up in the brain over a day and makes you sleepy. The tiredness does not go anywhere. It waits, and it arrives all at once when the caffeine clears. Piranhas are not what the films made them. Most species live largely on seeds and fruit that fall into the water. They become dangerous in the dry season when the pools shrink and there is nothing left to eat. Books used to be written on parchment made from animal skin. A single Bible could take several hundred sheep. That is the real reason books were rare and expensive, and why owning one meant something. It snows in the Sahara. Every few years, cold air arrives in winter and dusts the dunes white, and the pattern of snow lying in the ripples of the sand is one of the stranger sights on this planet. It rarely lasts a day. Our solar system takes about 225 million years to go once around the center of the galaxy. The last time we were in this part of the orbit, dinosaurs had not appeared yet. A koala sleeps up to 20 hours a day. Eucalyptus leaves contain almost no usable energy and take an enormous amount of work to digest. The sleep is not laziness. It is the only way the arithmetic works. The tallest building in the world is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai at more than 800 meters. It is visible from tens of kilometers away, and its top spends a good part of the year inside the clouds. The oceans circulate through what is called the thermohaline conveyor. Differences in temperature and saltiness push water down in one place and pull it up in another, linking every sea on Earth into one slow current. It takes 1,000 years to complete a lap. There is no wind on the moon. The footprints left by the Apollo astronauts are still exactly where they were made, sharp-edged, and they will stay that way for millions of years. A panda spends up to 14 hours a day eating. Bamboo contains so little nourishment that the animal has to process enormous quantities of it just to stay alive. Depending entirely on one plant is what makes the species so fragile. Volcanoes can change the climate. After Tambora erupted in 1815, so much dust reached the upper atmosphere that global temperatures fell. The following year had no proper summer, and harvests failed across the northern hemisphere. Sharks have no bones. Their whole skeleton is cartilage, which makes them lighter and more flexible than a fish of the same size built from bone. It is one reason the design has survived essentially unchanged for so long. Volcanic gas can kill without an eruption. Carbon dioxide seeps out of the ground, settles in low places because it is heavier than air, and pushes the oxygen out. Whole villages have been lost overnight to a lake of invisible gas. Some fish breathe air. Labyrinth fish come to the surface and take a gulp, using an organ above the gills to extract oxygen from it. It is what lets them live in warm, stagnant water where nothing else can. Under a hillside in Turkey, there is a city carved downwards through the rock. Derinkuyu goes down many floors, with ventilation shafts, wells, and stables, and it could hold tens of thousands of people. It was built to be disappeared into. Whales have earplugs that grow in layers, like the rings of a tree. Counting the layers gives the animal's age. That is how we know some whales live past 200. A mummy found in the Atacama Desert is more than 7,000 years old. It was deliberately prepared and preserved, which makes it older than any Egyptian mummy by thousands of years. Spiders also have blue blood, and for the same reason as the lobster. Copper does the work that iron does in ours. Below 150 meters, the Black Sea has no oxygen at all. What is down there instead is hydrogen sulfide. Nothing that breathes lives in it, and because nothing disturbs it, wooden ships from antiquity have been found on the bottom almost intact. Flying fish do not really fly. They build up speed underwater and launch, and their enlarged fins let them glide for up to 200 meters above the surface. It is an escape, not a journey. In the mountains of Peru, There are suspension bridges woven out of grass. They are made the way the Inca made them, and every year the villages on both sides take the old one down and weave a new one across the gorge together. The Colossus of Rhodes stood about 30 meters high, in bronze, over the entrance to a harbor. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and it stood for only 54 years before an earthquake brought it down. Seals can navigate by the stars. This was tested by putting them under a planetarium sky and changing it, and they swam according to the stars they were shown. Some bamboo grows up to a meter in a day. You can effectively watch it happen. In much of Asia, it is still both a building material and a food, harvested from the same stand. The coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth was in Antarctica, -89 degrees. Nothing complex can live in that. Microorganisms manage anyway. Flamingos are not born pink. They get the color from their food, from pigments in the algae and small crustaceans they filter out of the water. In zoos, the diet has to be supplemented, or the birds slowly fade to white. An owl's ears are set at different heights on its head. A sound arrives at one fractionally before the other, and from that difference the bird works out not only the direction, but the height of whatever made it. It can hunt in complete darkness on hearing alone. Edelweiss grows high in the Alps. Its petals are covered in fine white hairs that hold a layer of still air against the cold and scatter the ultraviolet light. It became a symbol of endurance because it survives where almost nothing else bothers to try. There are waterfalls on the ocean floor. Cold, salty water is heavier, and where it spills over an underwater wedge, it pours downwards in a current shaped exactly like a river falling. The largest of them is off Greenland, and it carries more water than every river on land combined. A sloth's fur grows the wrong way, from the belly towards the back. Hanging upside down for a lifetime, that is the direction rain needs to run. Algae grow in the grooves of each hair, and the green tint helps hide the animal in the canopy. Clay tablets keep turning up in the Middle East, covered in cuneiform. Most of them are not poetry or law. They are accounts. Sacks of grain, jars of oil, who owed what. Writing was invented for bookkeeping. A cuttlefish changes not only its color, but the texture of its skin. It can raise bumps and flaps until it matches a rock or a patch of weed, and it does it in under a second. It is the most complete camouflage in the animal world. Some ants farm. They cut leaves, carry them underground, and use them not as food, but as a bed for a fungus, which they tend, weed, and harvest. They have been doing it for millions of years longer than we have. In the high Himalayas, villages build ice stupas. They spray water into the winter air, so it freezes into a tower, and the tower stands through the spring and melts slowly, watering the fields at exactly the time of year the streams have not yet arrived. A snake's tongue is forked so it can smell in stereo. Each tip collects scent from a slightly different place. Each sends its signal to its own side of the brain, and the difference tells the animal which way to turn. Some trees walk. The walking palm in South America grows new roots on one side and lets the old ones on the other die back, and over years the whole trunk shifts towards better light. Roman houses had underfloor heating. It was called a hypostas. The floor stood on short pillars, and hot air from a furnace was drawn through the gap. 2,000 years later, we are still doing essentially the same thing. A seahorse moves each eye independently. One can watch for food while the other watches for danger. It never has to choose which to look at. On Madagascar, there is a night animal called the eye, with one long, thin, skeletal middle finger. It taps along a branch, listens for the hollow sound of a tunnel underneath, bites a hole, and hooks the grub out with that finger. Nothing else hunts like this. The greatest vertical drop on Earth is on Mount Thor on Baffin Island. The rock face falls more than 1,200 meters, and it overhangs the whole way down. Climbers come from everywhere to fail on it. A polar bear's skin is black. The fur is not white either. Each hair is hollow and colorless, and it looks white for the same reason snow does. The black skin underneath takes in whatever heat the sun offers. The oldest letter we have was pressed into clay about 4,000 years ago. It is not a declaration or a poem. It is a complaint about a delivery of copper that arrived in poor condition. A frog's heart has 3 chambers, and when the animal dives, it can route much of the blood past the lungs entirely. There is no point sending blood to lungs that are not being used. Some cacti grow more than 15 meters tall and hold thousands of liters of water inside. In a desert, a plant like that is not only a plant, it is a reservoir, and half the animals around it are living off what it stores. Across the Pacific, there are peoples who navigate by stars, swell, and the flight of birds. They crossed thousands of kilometers of open ocean and arrived at islands the size of a village with no instrument of any kind. Penguin feathers are waterproof, and beneath them lies a layer of down that holds warm air against the skin. That combination is what lets a bird swim for hours in water a few degrees above freezing. Colored ink used to be made from whatever the world offered. Blue came from lapis lazuli, ground up and carried across continents. Red came from an insect. Some of those pigments were worth more than gold by weight, which is why medieval painters used blue so sparingly. Etna, on Sicily, erupts more often than any other volcano in Europe. Its lava has built the plains around it, and the soil is so rich that people have farmed on its slopes for as long as there have been people there. The great wooden hall of Todaiji in Japan is nearly 1,300 years old and still standing. It has been rebuilt after fires, but the joinery follows the original method, and there is not a nail in it. Snakes have no eyelids. Each eye is covered by a clear scale that is replaced when the animal sheds its skin. It is why a snake appears to stare without ever blinking. It cannot blink. Lightning does strike the sea. The charge spreads out across the surface rather than going down, so it is dangerous at the top and almost nothing at depth. The fish a few meters below never notice. My dear friends, that is the end of our long walk for tonight. We have touched a few hundred small things about people, about nature, about history, and about the enormous space we are sitting in. Each of them is a key to a door somewhere. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for letting all of this become part of your evening. Now it is time to close your eyes and rest. May your sleep tonight be calm, deep, and untroubled. And may you wake tomorrow with a little more strength and a little more of the world in you than you had yesterday.